Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I am Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health. Sometimes disturbing, but not today. We are talking about the vast benefits of molecular hydrogen. My guest today is Paul Baratierro, and he has lectured across the globe for the last 22 years. And in the last 12 years ago, he set out to educate the world on the vast benefits of molecular hydrogen. And that's why we brought him on the show. His message is focused on the critical role of molecular hydrogen, which is H2 for you chemistry buffs out there, to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, two terms that are near and dear to all of us listeners and followers of What the Health. So I'm really excited to have you on today, Paul. You've developed the Echo Hydrogen Water System, as well as other products to modulate immune and cognitive function. You've lectured across the world and has been on national television in the U.S., Germany, Switzerland. You've been on Know the Cause. You're featured in the Truth About Cancer docuseries. You've been on radio shows, podcasts. You are really getting it out there, passionate about the prevention of pathologies. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Yes. I am, we're hearing a lot more, and maybe it's as of the result of you getting the good word out on the vast benefits of molecular hydrogen. And, so one, how did you get into this?
That's a good question. It goes back about 15 years, 17 years now. My sweetheart, my queen, love of my life of 27 years of marriage now, she was sick and I was looking for ways to help her. I was currently working with patients with diabetes. That was my scope of practice, and that was what I was focused on. But she was having significant issues. She was anemic. She had thyroid issues, gynecological issues. And anyways, I was looking, as any good husband should.
Yeah.
I was looking for ways to help her. And so in my search, in looking and no stone not turned over, right? I wanted to find out. And so it led me down this road to water. And back then, there was no knowledge of hydrogen. There was only alkaline water systems out there, when you're talking 15, 17 years ago. And so not only did that help her, but it helped patients that I have with diabetes, type 2 diabetes mellitus. However, I could not ever accept the fact that it was the pH of the water that was beneficial, because that's just counterproductive in the body. And we know that blood, for instance, is 735 to 745. There's just not a large range of pH in the body. So I could never accept that. So in 2008, 2009, that time period is when I discovered that hydrogen was the reason or the mechanism of healing with these waters. It had nothing to do with the pH of the water. It was the fact that there was dissolved hydrogen gas and the electrical potential. So it was an aha moment for me, and I went full speed into hydrogen. And I tell you now, there's 997 studies showing therapeutic effects with 170 human disease models. And I began lecturing in 2009 on hydrogen, and everyone thought I was crazy, and now they don't think I'm so crazy.
I love that. 997 studies on molecular hydrogen.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. Like, what molecular hydrogen, where are we getting it from? I mean, we see H2O, right? So in water, but in what roles does it have? We'll start I'll delineate the topic component. So we'll start out with, the oxidative stress and inflammation and how molecular hydrogen functions there, but also how do we get it and why is it a big deal? Like,
oh, very good. Yeah, and I would say it's mission critical for homeostasis, for the normal function of the body. And so we'll go into that in a minute. But here, the reality is the leading cause of disease, and it doesn't matter what disease you're talking about, the leading cause of disease is oxidative stress and inflammation. Now, oxidative stress can come through various different paths. You can have toxicity from multiple things. It can be overuse of antibiotics. It can be heavy metals. It can be pesticides. It can be relationships. There's a number, as you know, of pathways that get you to the fact that you actually have not oxidation, because that's normal, but oxidative stress. So this is what we have to get rid of, because once someone has oxidative stress, they're going to have inflammation after that. And it's the combination of those two that cause disease. So what hydrogen's role is in the body in general is to regulate antioxidant pathways, whether we're talking about NRF1, NRF2, SIRT1, telomerase activities, all different aspects in the body that are all about radicals and the ability to counteract the effects of the radicals. So when you have oxidative stress, your body's not functioning properly to counteract the effects of radicals and therefore oxidative stress. And it has a huge, whether it's joint issues, neurologic issues, or many other disease models, that's the result. So the big question, the $1 million question is, how, if hydrogen is so mission critical, which we know it is, if we have 1,000 studies showing 170 diseases from cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism, bipolar, schizophrenia, you name it, right? Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, to throw out a crazy one. But the reality is, if hydrogen is so mission critical, which it is, why don't we just have a hydrogen tank, strapped to our leg when we come out of the womb? Well, the reality is it's better than that. We are supposed to produce 10 to 12 liters of hydrogen gas per day in the gut. And, flatulence, right? It's flammable. We all know the jokes from college and whatever, but, you have methane, you have hydrogen, it's all produced in the gut. And the way that is supposed to happen is we are supposed to have anaerobic microflora, and we are supposed to eat fiber-rich foods. We are supposed to eat foods that are comprised partially of short-chain fatty acids, medium-chain fatty acids. Well, when we have fiber-rich foods and when we have fatty acids in foods, if we have anaerobic microflora, and particularly hydrogen trophs, these are these amazing little bacteria that are supposed to be in our gut. They're called hydrogen trophs. Those hydrogen trophs convert fiber, water-soluble, beneficial fiber, into hydrogen gas. Now, what's really cool is they consume 30% of that gas themselves as their energy source. And then 70% would come into the body and do what it does. So what does hydrogen really do? It doesn't do much heavy lifting, actually. When we look at medicine, or we look at from a clinical perspective, hydrogen doesn't do a lot. But what it does is it signal modulates. And there's over 200 biomolecules that have been understood that hydrogen is actually regulating, and that covers every aspect of the body. So whether you're talking pathways or systems or neurologic function or brain or whatever, hydrogen is a huge signal modulator in the body. And so when you don't have hydrogen, these systems do not function. And so people are supplementing with all kinds of things that are supposed to modulate those same pathways. But if we had our guts intact, functioning properly, we would be able to do this on our own. So at the end of the day, it's gut dysfunction that caused me to create the machine and to develop another vehicle for hydrogen for the body, because people weren't producing it on their own.
Wow. So, all right, I want to back up to how much hydrogen are we supposed to naturally be producing every day?
10 to 12 liters.
10 to 12 liters
of gas. And we're liters of gas, which is different than liters of liquid, but liters of gas. You're supposed to fart a lot.
Yeah, it actually, fun factoid for all you viewers and listeners out there, around flatulence, the average amount of passed gas a day in North America is 24 times, which seems like a lot, right? That's the average, right? So that is on the hydrogen front of a healthy gut, what is needed for our systems to function well. So, okay, so that's good. So we do need the hydrogen gas. So what, I guess you've been at it now for 12 years with the company, right?
2011 is when I started the company. January 2012, we shipped the first machines. Yes.
Got it. And so have you seen a change in the health of people over the last decade, with a worsening of less gas, more gastro problems, worse diet, perhaps with glyphosate coming in as well, wrecking tight junctions in the gut. So even there's a building or increased need for supplemental molecular hydrogen.
Well, absolutely. So yes, we definitely have seen a rise of disease models. I mean, I don't know that there's anyone that would argue that. Any medical professional, any non-medical professional, you would be crazy in your head to not argue that we are rapidly increasing disease, those that are contracting disease or pathologies. You look back 100 years ago, we didn't have these same issues going on. You look back 50 years ago. So we are rapidly increasing in the number of pathologies that people are contracting. It used to be you'd be in a room and you would say, by raise of hand, how many people have a family member that has such and such, right? And you'd have, 20%. Now it's 100.
Yeah.
We have 100%. So the reality is oxidative stress, but really the issue is gut dysfunction. And most people have no clue what that even means. We hear of leaky gut, and I mean, you think something's running down your leg or something. I don't know,
Right.
But what is, that's such a horrible term in my opinion, leaky gut. But the whole point is, what does gut dysfunction mean? What does it actually mean to have a healthy gut? And what does it actually mean to have not a healthy gut? That's what I think most people have no understanding of.
For sure. One of the reasons why I have yellow on my walls, I come from the Chinese medicine camp of the spleen and stomach, which is digestion. And that, coupled with the naturopathic medicine, is also meets in the gut. So really good health begins in the gut. I mean, that's how I learned it, starting in 1996. And you are so correct. Like, we are very disconnected with what does good gut health look like or mean. So maybe I will lob that over to you, sir, on what is that? What does that look like? Or why don't we have an understanding as to what that is?
Well, good question. I simply think it's because people have no idea the bacteria is what equals a healthy gut. And they want to think of probiotic. There's just this complete disconnect to what the gut is for, what the gut does. I think most people have no idea that, 60-70% of your immune function is tied to gut health. And if we're saying it's tied to gut health, then what does that really mean? Well, what it really means is 91 to 94% of your bacteria in the gut should be anaerobic microflora, and only 1 to 4% should be aerobic. Well, the problem is overuse of antibiotics, pesticides, heavy metals, what have you. Well, the bottom line is that we are under a chemical attack or a chemical invasion, and that's it. And
You're
so
really speaking my language there. And, that's what we've been educating of why I created this platform called What the Health, is that we are, our environment matters, right? Go figure. And what we eat, the air we breathe, what we drink, all of these have an impact on us as human beings on the planet. And what we're seeing with the rising, like over half of children now have chronic disease. These are like unfathomable numbers that we're seeing, on neurocognitive decline and Alzheimer's rates going 1 in 2 men by the age of 65. Blue Cross Blue Shield recently, 2019 actuarial, numbers showing average age of cognitive decline is 47 years old. So it's actually lowering, and because, increased stress, increased toxicity. And so we are, one of the components is we definitely need to get active on cleaning up our environment. But in the meantime, it's like these are therapies that can really come into play to really help us thrive, because we are adaptable beings, right?
Right.
And so having that aspect of the gut health, when you talk about the molecular hydrogen really reducing oxidative stress and inflammation, what's that tie into immune system function then? Because you're saying, a great portion of our immune system surrounds our gut as well.
Right. So here's what's interesting. When I developed the machine, there's really 4 specific things that it does that are literally separate modalities, all built into one device, but they are functioning differently. So, for example, hydrogen itself cannot repair the gut. The gut is supposed to produce hydrogen when it's, fermenting food, when it's going through this process of digestion. You should be producing hydrogen. But if you do not have the correct bacteria, you're not going to be able to do that. And even if the bacteria is in the wrong part of the gastrointestinal tract, you're not going to have success in this process. So the reality is you can't use hydrogen to repair the gut, but we can repair the gut in a week to 2 weeks. And I have so many people that are gluten and dairy intolerant that can eat gluten and dairy within 2 weeks of drinking the water out of my machine, simply because we're rehabbing the gut. And so the way I do that is different than most anyone else ever has talked about. And it has to do with the polarity of the tissue in the gut. So when we look at the epithelial or the gastrointestinal tract lining, the lining of the gut, for anaerobic microflora to flourish and to be happy campers, to want to live there. In other words, if we want the proper terrain or biome, we have to have a negative 300 or higher electrical potential of the tissue itself. So if we can get the tissue to a negative 300 to a negative 400 millivolts of electrical potential, then boom, we selectively stimulate anaerobic microflora. So one of the things that I made sure when I developed the machine is that the water coming out had a negative 450 millivolts of electrical potential. So when it goes into the gut, you selectively stimulate anaerobic microflora. So literally by drinking the water. So it's not the hydrogen. When you drink the water, there's multiple things. So let me kind of tell you the cascading of what happens if you were to take a glass of water like I have right here, and I drink it. And within 2 minutes, the hydrogen that's dissolved in the water stimulates gastric ghrelin. I don't know if you're familiar with ghrelin, but you have leptin and then you have ghrelin. These are 2 master hormones. But for Parkinson's, for Alzheimer's, for autism, for bipolar, schizophrenia, these kind of neuro issues, we need ghrelin secretion. So typically ghrelin would be secreted in the stomach or the intestinal tract. But when you do not have a healthy gut, you don't have ghrelin secretion. So many kids with autism, the reason they have that is because they're not secreting ghrelin. So within 2 minutes, and we've already done brain mapping, we do all this stuff, but within 2 minutes of drinking the water, you have ghrelin secretions going to the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the brainstem to change plasticity by 32%, normalization of the brain by 58%, and balancing, theta, beta waves, all these different things. So the brain and neuroprotective effects are huge. The next thing that would be happening is the water is going to come right out the pyloric valve into the duodenum or the duodenum, depending on how you want to pronounce that, which is pancreatic juice, and then it goes into the small intestine. And that electrical potential goes with it. And so you immediately begin stimulating the growth of anaerobic microflora. And once you have changed that biome or that terrain, we don't need to seed bacteria. Bacteria is already in the environment, and we have to stop thinking that you have to seed everything, because if that was true, we would never have algae in a fish tank, for example. I mean, where does it come from when the water's out of balance? The reality is, in our biome, in our terrain, in our world we live in, we have everything positive and everything negative. Whatever we stimulate the environment is what's going to appear. And it's kind of like build it and they will come kind of a mentality. So if we can change the tissue of the gut, then the right bacteria will come. If we reverse back to a positive electrical potential, then aerobic bacteria will be stimulated. It's simply the environment, and the bacteria that enjoy that environment will come. And so we can very quickly rehab the gut. Well, that's your immune function. The bacteria itself in the gastrointestinal tract is your ability to fight off invasion, is your ability. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is more of your personality, more of your food cravings, more of who you are than you probably care to think about has to do with your gut.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. You know, I think if we removed all the aerobic and anaerobic bacteria out of the average North American, we'd have about 4 to 7 pounds of material, right? So
Yes.
it's a little bit gross, but also very essential. And, you know, I want to really highlight that component around the neuroprotective, the neuro healing, the neurologic system, because this is a big deal. To create the right environment. And, you know, it reminds me of the quote from Bruce Lipton, who really started a big thing around epigenetics of like, it's not your genes, it's the environment, stupid, right? Yes. So, I mean, not so kind, but those are his words, not mine.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, he says it the way it is. He's a good guy.
Yes, he's a great guy. And so with, you know, that makes entire total sense. And in a unified field discussion around health, it is providing the body and its inherent wisdom the best ability, which is just repolarizing the gut, is what you're saying with the product. It brings out the healing potential of our anaerobic bacteria because they're already in there. They're just not winning out. Then the other emphasis is on, you know, like, your gut microbiome determines your personality, right? Of more than we care to admit, right? Yes. You are what you eat, that old adage, and kind of garbage in, garbage out. I mean, there's a whole litany of things to follow up there, but it's so exciting. On this, so on your research that you've shown, because you put out some pretty interesting stats there.
Yeah.
What can you go into that a little bit more?
Sure.
I do have some providers that tune in, and, you know, we're out to educate people to make big changes in their communities. Yeah.
Yeah. So out of the 997 studies, 115 are human. Okay. So double blind. You're talking cancer, colon cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism, bipolar, schizophrenia, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I mean, literally it goes to another 160 disease models. We have a website called hydrogenstudies.com. There's nothing but studies on there, education. And then, of course, I have studies galore in my laptop, so I can send them out to any doctors who want that. But, you know, there are so many different things. We could spend 100 hours talking about this. When we look at cancer cells, what's the highlight of that study? Apoptosis was benefited by hydrogen. So why do cancer cells grow so wonderfully and don't destroy themselves like they are supposed to? Well, typically apoptosis is what is to stop cells from multiplying and dividing improperly. But somehow when cancer takes over a cell, apoptosis is stopped. Huge benefit. Hydrogen comes in and restarts or benefits what's called cell apoptosis. This is huge. So during the study, which actually that particular study was done by the chemotherapy company, the 5-fluorouracil, if you're familiar with colon cancer, 5-fluorouracil is the chemotherapy drug of choice for that. What did they do? They wanted to see what the difference was of giving cancer patients hydrogen water and then combining it with their drug. So what did we learn? We learned high content hydrogen water, the kind of water that comes out of my machine. High content hydrogen water had strong anti-cancer and antioxidative effects in the body. That's what the study showed. Also, when they combined with 5-fluorouracil, there was 100% cancer cell death. So this was a good study, right? It was a great study. And I'm not promoting chemotherapy, of course. I'm a naturopath. But the reality is that it's good to know that adding hydrogen greatly improved the outcome of their own therapy. And so that's what they wanted to understand. And they also, another cool thing, they compared hydrogen water that was found from Mount Fuji in Japan. So again, a lot of people don't know that hydrogen water is also natural. There are many places on the earth you can go to get it. Not everyone wants to hike a very high mountain and try to get hydrogen water. So that's why I developed a machine. But what they said was the naturally occurring hydrogen water versus high content hydrogen water out of a machine like ours had a very different antioxidative and anti-cancer-like effect in the body. And it's interesting. It's very interesting because they showed the difference in that study. But when you look at Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, for example, not only do we get the calls and emails from spouses saying, holy cow, my spouse just began drinking your water an hour ago, and they're doing things they haven't been able to do in 5 years, right? This is huge. Biggest one is tremors. A lot of individuals with tremors, when they drink our water, within 10 minutes or so, their hands are almost still. This is huge. And they'll say, my brain, my head is tingling, like what's going on? And I said, well, you haven't had ghrelin secretions and you're normalizing brain function. And so that's huge. But the thing that I like to see is in the Parkinson's study itself, it actually says in there that hydrogen stimulates ghrelin secretions and that it has a disease modifying effect. Now that's very strong language for a study when you're talking about neuroprotective effects, but it is specifically talking about hydrogen water has a disease modifying effect because it stimulates ghrelin. And what we need to understand is there's no striatal hydrogen in the brain. Hydrogen did not go to the brain. Hydrogen selectively stimulated ghrelin secretions, and there were striatal ghrelin in the brain. And so we got to understand that hydrogen is modulating signals and giving direction, but it's the second messengers that are doing the work. When it gets to diabetes, this is near and dear to my heart because I spent many years in this pathology trying to prevent decubitus ulcers and amputations, and we did. But imagine when I understood that we could actually change the disease model, I was far more passionate with that, and I sold the shoe company that I had. So the bottom line is in a double-blind study that was done on type 2 diabetes mellitus, for example, and those with IGT or impaired glucose tolerance, 80% of those individuals with impaired glucose tolerance were normalized in an 8-week study, double-blind study. And also what we saw was a 15.5% reduction of LDL or cholesterol.
Wow.
Well, and it makes sense when you think about it, because why is cholesterol there in the first place? It's because the body put it there to patch the veins, right? Because you have oxidative stress systemically, and therefore you have weakness in the venous system. So if you're affecting or reducing oxidative stress systemically, which we're saying hydrogen does, and studies prove it, then guess what? You don't need the cholesterol anymore in the veins, so the body's going to pull it back. And so you literally had a 15.5% reduction of, small dense LDL oxidized, and we get into SOD activity and adiponectin and different things like this that are in the body that were also reduced, which is huge. But we have telomerase activity in the body. We have NRF1, NRF2, SIRT1 activity in the body. So from an antioxidant perspective, right, of course, if we know it changes telomere lengths, then we know it's anti-aging. I mean, we can check all the boxes. But the reality that really makes me so excited are the individuals that have anxiety and depression and are on mind-altering drugs that don't anymore have to take those drugs, or those that have food cravings, sugar and carbs, or they have anxiety and depression, and then those things go away when you rehab the gut. These are the kind of things that really affect generations, because if you have a parent who is in this situation, well, it's going to be a very different life for the children. So it's very exciting. And the same as diabetes. If you can normalize glucose levels in 3 to 5 days, which most people, not all, but most people do, this is huge for a family. And I've seen so much. I mean, you got to understand, millions of people are benefited by our systems now. I've sold over 250,000 machines, and it's hard to calculate what effect that's had on the world.
That is awesome. That's an awesome effect. And so let's talk about I want to talk about the Parkinson's. I want to talk a bit on the study on diabetes. And then also I'm curious on just seizure disorders, if you've seen anything there.
Sure.
So let's start on the Parkinson's front. In the Ghrelin. So Ghrelin is naturally produced in the gut. So how does the body tie us into that one more time through that cascade?
Yes. So Ghrelin should be produced either in the stomach or the gut. And the problem is, if your gut's not functioning, then that's lost too. So not only are you not able to produce hydrogen, which is going to regulate oxidation in the body and inflammation and many, many, many other things, but you also aren't producing ghrelin. So there are some really good studies on young males that don't produce ghrelin. And what they're showing is that they have an inability to produce ghrelin, and therefore they have autism. And so the next study that they did was getting ghrelin into their system by utilizing hydrogen, and again, disease modifying or what have you. So normally you should be producing, but if your gut is not functioning, you're not going to produce ghrelin, and therefore you're not going to have sharpness in your brain. You're not going to have the cognitive function that you desire and want. So ghrelin is supposed to be there, and that is supposed to sharpen our minds. And we do call it the hunger hormone, not because it makes you hungry, but because when you are hungry, the body produces or stimulates the production of ghrelin. I can imagine back when we were hunters and gatherers and you were hungry, yeah, it would be good for you to have a sharper mind if you were hunting something. I don't know. It's just my thoughts. But many times when I do like a 3-day or 5-day water fast, for example, or any kind of fasting, some people do it for religious purpose, some people do it just for health reasons or whatever. The reality is I am sharper. And I believe it's because of production of ghrelin. I think that you should be dumber when you're fasting, right?
Yeah.
But many times you feel sharper, and I think it's ghrelin. But what we have seen is when water with hydrogen gas is dissolved in it, which you can only get from a device like mine or going to a natural source in the world, which isn't so easy, then when it hits the stomach, you selectively stimulate ghrelin. So that's the only way to do it is if you drink water with hydrogen and it hits your stomach, you're going to selectively stimulate ghrelin secretions. And we have studies to prove that. If your gut is functioning properly, then you would also produce ghrelin naturally, but that requires you getting your gut functioning back. But those are the two ways that you would have ghrelin secretions. And I can tell you, Greg, you could spend 100 hours just on a topical study on ghrelin and what it regulates from circadian rhythms to you name it. It's mind-boggling when you look at all the things that ghrelin regulates. So again, hydrogen does what it does, and then when it modulates other things like ghrelin, it's incredible to think of all the benefits you're going to get.
So specifically around neuroprotection, in that Parkinson's study, you saw an increased striated ghrelin production and changes in the brain.
Correct.
Wow. That is phenomenal. So it is.
Well, Alzheimer's, the same study primarily was Parkinson's, but also referenced Alzheimer's. So you really had both in that one study showing disease modifications.
Yes. And that is very strong language in any publication.
Yeah.
And, both of those, I think, are linked because of prionic activity. They just have different misfolded proteins. So I'm wondering if you come across any of the research with the molecular hydrogen with misfolded proteins or prionic activity. I'm going to just throw it out there.
Send it to you. Huh?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I will. I could actually, I can send you a ton of studies if you're bored Friday nights. And you want to read studies. Let me tell you, I'm so passionate about it because over the years, you got to understand, when I started doing this, I figured out hydrogen was the mechanism of healing in 2008 and 2009. There were no studies. The first foundational study was done by Nature. So Nature published a study showing hydrogen to be a selective antioxidant. And the fact that it only reached and reacted with ROS, basically oxygen radicals, was mind-blowing. And they particularly talked about hydroxyl radicals, which hydroxyl radicals are the most cytotoxic or cell-damaging radical in the human body. And they typically are in the mitochondrial respiratory chain, wreaking havoc on energy production. So this was a huge, in 2009 when they published this study, it was huge for the medical community. And understand that the 997 studies came as a result of that foundational study in the last 10 years. Well, 12 years now, let's say, if you count 2021. But the point is, it's new to most people. However, when was a water electrolysis discovered? 1800 by Dr. Anthony Carlisle. And he said he was creating a hydrogen supply. That's what he was doing. Was the reason he created water electrolysis was to harvest hydrogen gas. So of course I started thinking, why the heck, what did he know about hydrogen in 1800?
Yeah.
Well, he referenced in 1798, he was at a medical conference and they talked about hydrogen being antioxidant. And I was like mind blown, because, and then we started looking, and we found the doctors were using hydrogen in World War II for gunshot wounds. And the more I start looking at all this, I'm like, oh my heavens, why are we so dumb sometimes and we forget stuff that was great, right?
Right.
And so here you are, 221 years ago, some surgeon in London was like, I'm going to figure out how to separate water to harvest hydrogen.
Wow.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. So here we are today, and we have 1,000 studies again that we started this process over again.
Right.
But it's a beautiful thing. And I'm telling you, like almost every week, new studies are published on new pathology. And imagine non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? I mean, this is a pretty interesting pathology.
This is a silent epidemic, actually.
Yeah.
So many people don't know that they actually have cirrhosis or going towards cirrhosis of their liver.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what did we learn in the study? When you drink hydrogen water, there was no fat accumulation. Even though you had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, there was no fat accumulation. So it modified the disease. And so, I mean, we're just finding out interesting stuff. When we look at athletes, we have pro players, amateur players, and athletes, elite athletes that use our water and have for years. Why? No fatigue. So you ask the question, well, what the heck's going on? Well, they did a study on soccer players, a double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, and what did they learn? No lactate buildup in the muscle.
Wow.
When they were drinking hydrogen water about half an hour before the event. So not only did no lactate buildup, which obvious why there was no fatigue, but also they tested flexion and extension on the knee, for example. And what they saw in these players was that they did not have an exercise-induced muscle decline of any kind. The players that were drinking the placebo water had normal fatiguing as they expected. But when they were those that were drinking the hydrogen water had no fatigue that set in. And so they were boggled by that. And so I've seen that, but now it's nice to have a study talking about lactate and talking about these things. But the topics are pretty incredible, and the disease modifications are huge.
How much water then were they having to drink to get that response?
So, well, and this is the big question, right? It's not a lot. So when we look at the diabetes study, they were drinking 900 ml per day. That's it, 16 ounces. So you're talking 16 ounces, and they typically, what's considered therapeutic is a half a part per million of hydrogen gas dissolved in the water. Now our machine produces double that. So you end up with 1 part per million, plenty. But for the neuroprotective effects for Ghrelin secretions, guess what concentration of hydrogen gas you need in the water?
I don't know.
0.1 parts per million. So
that's it.
Yeah. So that's enough to stimulate Ghrelin.
Huh. 0.1.
0.1 parts per million of hydrogen gas will stimulate Ghrelin secretions and neuroprotective effects. So we don't need a ton. We don't even need a lot of hydrogen. You just need it on a regular basis, which is why you're supposed to produce it in your gut. And we obviously are not getting a ton through the gut, right? It's going out the tailpipe. But again, we need to understand it's signal modulation that's causing these pathways to function. So it's like anything else. I use this example because a lot of people don't understand signal modulation, right?
Yeah.
So let's use an example of a fire alarm as signal modulation, right? So you're in a hotel, you're having a great time, sitting at the bar, sitting in the lobby, whatever you're doing, sitting up in your room, having a nice conversation. And what happens? Fire alarm goes off. Now, what just happened? You were modulated. It's a signal. What's the signal? The sound. What's the modulation? You know exactly what you're supposed to do. No one needs to say a word to you.
Yeah.
That sound alone tells you there may be danger from fire in the building, and you need to get out of this structure safely. Take your stuff, take your loved ones, and get out. Unless you hear what? Well, we're all hoping for. This was an accident or a test, or your son pulled the fire alarm in the hallway, guys. So, but the reality is that is an example of signal modulation. You didn't need any words. You didn't need to read a book. You received volumes of information from a sound. Well, the same is true for hydrogen in the body. So just like you don't need to turn the volume up on the alarm, just the fact that you heard it modulated you. You didn't need to have the most loud alarm system you could ever buy. No different than hydrogen. You don't need a ton of hydrogen to modulate pathways. You just need the presence of hydrogen in the body to modulate. So again, it goes back to the story that the creator created a hydrogen generator inside of you. And if you have hydrogen, you have the benefits. If you do not have hydrogen, then you lack all of these benefits, and you will feel it. Because imagine, not only do you lack the ability to produce hydrogen, but your immune function is probably about 30%. And so here you are functioning about 30%. Can you live that way? Of course, people do it, millions of them every day. But if you get attacked with two different angles, well, now it's a problem because you're susceptible. You can live with 30% immune, but you're not really in a healthy place. You don't have any extra capacity to handle big stuff. And so this is what I tell people is this isn't a miracle cure. This is simply giving your body back a tool that it's supposed to produce on its own. So when you put hydrogen in the body, oh my gosh, people with joint issues, people with, rheumatoid arthritis, people with all kinds of issues immediately are like, what happened to my pain, my joint pain? What happened to this? What happened to that? It's gone. I'm like, well, you do understand that rheumatoid arthritis comes from oxidative stress. So we removed the oxidative stress. You no longer have the joint issues and the inflammation and all this stuff. And you might have been probably dehydrated too. And so let's give you some water. But yeah.
Have you seen on the research when you've been feeding hydrogen water, doing microbiome testing and seeing the changes that are occurring there?
Yes.
Yes.
We've also had a little fun, and when medical professionals say they're having fun, sometimes it's weird. Okay.
You made me smile with that. I perked up. Yes.
Because we do weird stuff for fun.
Yes.
But here's the deal. I asked for some volunteers who had significant gut issues, your SIBO and your IBS individuals, who you have some of these individuals who are on a horrible protocol, but it's an antibacterial protocol.
Right.
You know who we're talking about out there. Yeah. It's those individuals who have to work and they just don't want to deal with pain in their gut. And so they would rather every single day take antibiotics, keep inflammation down, and go to work and do what you're going to do. So I asked a few people, and it was only 3 people, so it wasn't a big study, but it was just for fun. Nothing was documented. It was just for me to understand. I asked these individuals, if you will do me a favor, if you would start drinking this water on a daily basis and tell me when you start to feel pain, because that's going to tell me when inflammation comes back, right? Because the body's going to try to heal itself, and inflammation is the mechanism to do so. And remember, I kept them on their antibiotic regime. So we said, keep taking those like you normally did, but I want you to drink this water also and tell me when you start feeling pain again in the gut, which is telling me if we're outpacing the antibiotics' ability to kill. In other words, are we producing anaerobic microflora? Are we producing bacteria faster than it can be killed? It's an interesting question.
You're like you're crowding out the bad guys and supporting the good guys.
Right. So it was a few hours.
Wow.
And with every one of them within the first day, we're like, oh, I am feeling pain. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Can you keep drinking the water and tell me what happens? And every one of them we outpaced. And so it's a good. Now I'm looking for someone that can help me actually do what I'd call a clinical, which means I don't do patient care anymore. So I don't have any individuals with SIBO or IBS or anything, but I'd like to have someone who has some, that we could do a small little pilot, a clinical, nothing crazy, but just to see what happens with their intestinal tract and their issue altogether. Because I can tell you right now, we have many people that buy our system that have these horrible gut issues, and they are helped. A majority of them are helped. There are a few that just are unwilling to accept the pain in the beginning, and many of them don't have any pain. So I don't understand the linear aspect of it yet. I really don't, because it's not my expertise. I'm not an expert in SIBO and what have you, IBS, but there are many that say, nope, I had no issue, and wow, am I feeling better? I can eat food without problems. And others are like, oh man, it was painful the first day and I just couldn't keep it going. So what I'm wanting to do is do a little bit of a more of a trial, and
I love it. I have colleagues that actually have that as their specialty, and I will connect you to them. Yep.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. That'll be great. Okay, so then I wanted to talk about the diabetes component. We're coming pretty much in the last 10 minutes of the show. So we'll talk diabetes on the reductions of sugar, because when you're talking about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome this is like the American
That's another
way.
one there's another one you can help with.
And so this is such a big therapy on I'm telling people to hydrate every day, so why not hydrogen water?
Correct.
Right. And so use it as a therapeutic, not just for hydration. Their sugar dropping. So was this like folks with their hemoglobin A1C? Did you see the hemoglobin A1C dropping, or was it their morning blood sugars? Well, what can you?
That's 90 days later, right? You're having to watch the A1Cs, but absolutely they drop. Of course they drop. They'd have to drop, or you're not really accomplishing much. Right. But here's the deal. It's all about lipid and glucose metabolism, and that's what hydrogen is reinvigorating. That's what's important for us to understand, is that it's not particularly dealing with sugar. It's lipid and glucose metabolism that's going on. And I believe, I don't have any proof of this, but I believe it's leptin sensitivity as well, that it's stimulating. If it's working with Ghrelin, we know it has to be working with leptin. We just don't have anything to say, oh, we've studied it and here's what it says. I was going to read you something really quick. Give me one.
You can say all of those sexy words all day long. Talking shop. It's so fun. And so, I'm going to let you find that spot.
Here it is.
Perfect.
So this was a study, randomized, obviously, supplementation of hydrogen-rich water improves lipid and glucose metabolism in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus or impaired glucose tolerance. Mm-hmm. And so what they talked about, I'm gonna read this. This was a double-blind, 30 patients crossover, and they had type 2 diabetes mellitus controlled by diet and exercise. So, and there was 6 patients on top of the 30 that had IGT. So you're talking about a 36 patient, not a huge study, but fine enough to see what it's doing. So here's what they did. So it says several biomarkers of oxidative stress, insulin resistance, and glucose metabolism assessed by an oral glucose tolerance test were evaluated at baseline and at 8 weeks. Intake of hydrogen-rich water was associated with a significant decrease in levels of modified low, LDL, cholesterol, and the net negative charge of LDL, small dense LDL, and urinary 8 isoproteins. So I'll continue. It says hydrogen water intake was also associated with a trend of decreased serum concentration of oxidized LDL, free fatty acids, increased plasma levels of adiponectin, extracellular superoxide dismutase, and in 4 of 6 patients with IGT, intake of hydrogen rich water normalized the oral glucose tolerance test.
Wow.
That's how they assessed the situation. Now I can send you the entire study, but it's significant.
Yeah.
And I can tell you in my own world of doing this for many years, that's what got me so excited way back years ago, 2005, 2006, 7, 8, 9. I would give individuals with diabetes water, and within 3 to 5 days, their blood sugars were normal and they were no longer having to, so, I mean, that's huge. I don't know if there's a price tag on somebody's life. If you can do that for them, it's pretty significant. But that's what, besides my wife's menstrual cycle normalizing in 6 months, besides her anemia, besides all the things that happen with my sweetheart, it's the hundreds of thousands of others that have been benefited with different pathologies and issues and whatever. It's been an incredible blessing, an incredible journey. And I just have such gratitude to be able to be a small part in this whole thing.
I love it. I think you're playing a big part, Paul, with impacting that many families and with all of the units and educating on this topic, because it is really simple, but you have to look for it, right?
Yeah.
And, I can make it complex talking in a fractal unified field in quantum mechanics, because that's kind of what brings up in my head, which I'll talk offline with you around that.
Yeah, sure.
And for our listeners and viewers, if this is a big deal like this, we're talking about 160 to 170 chronic illnesses.
Yes.
We've got research on just hydrogen water.
That's right.
When we're looking at tools, until we get our environment cleaned up, our air cleaned, our water cleaned, these are things that we can put in our own families for ourselves, our loved ones, and then start helping other people understand, like, if we're drinking this type of water, this can really help a lot with the chronic illness that we see until we get the world cleaned up, which we're working on. But in the meantime, we need some help now. And this is a really simple solution, because we all are drinking water, right? I mean, I've been educating about water and hydration for 21 years. So you put in the right component. So the third piece that I wanted to get to was around seizures and seizure disorders. With my background and my practice being really heavy in the neurologic realms, neurodegeneration, brain health, and longevity. Do you have any research or off the top that comes to mind when I bring up seizure disorders?
Yeah, I don't really. I can do some. Yeah, we can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a study guide, which really indexes, because what we're in the process of doing is indexing all 997 studies with what pathways were responsible and benefited by hydrogen. And it's going to be a year and a half, 2 years before it's finished, because it's a lot of studies to fully understand every pathway that is changed or modified. But I can tell you with tremors, it's pretty, I mean, we just had someone last week who said, I only have tremors on one hand, not the other when I get stressed out. But when I drank your water, 90% gone, tremors, even when I'm stressed and crazy. So, and then also we do have brain mapping equipment in our office, and we can show, and I can send you some images of literally 5 minutes after a 62-year-old female, nothing else, but we gave her a glass of water, and you can see the difference in the brain with.
Wow. What equipment, may I ask, what equipment are you using to track that?
Well, I don't know which machine Dr. Kelly Miller in Florida. If you've ever heard of Dr. Kelly Miller, he's the one that did a 10-patient trial. My equipment is the master. But we we can do, you just have the electrodes on their head and you're mapping out the brain. So, that's the process that we do. But the reality is you can see it within minutes. And I don't know, I'll have to look and see if there's anything specific on seizures, but I don't know. I would have to say.
I'll do some research with you too, because I just figured I'd ask you, I have you on the show, so I'd get to cherry pick there. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I did.
No, it's okay. I'm always happy to say, no, I don't know.
Good. Yeah. Likewise. And we can always look it up. So it is, coming down the kind of the tail of the show. got in the last 3 minutes, let's
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
what would any last parting words that you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners? Now, I'm going to have all of your links around this, and it's going
Sure.
to be in the show notes of how to get in touch and
Thank
your
you.
website and all of that, which is super impressive. I got to check that out. So I'm going to, again, say any last parting words for our listeners and viewers.
I would just say this is a life-changing event for even those that are healthy. So everyone, including me, I'm pretty dang healthy, but I've been drinking the water for so many years, and I can tell you it's a difference. People meet me all the time and they're like, I had no idea you're 49 years old, right? I have no idea, whatever. And that's what you want. You want to be aging gracefully. You want to be doing these things. And again, if you implement this in your life, there are 3 things that you get. You're going to get clean water because our filtration removes glyphosate, removes heavy metals, pesticides, bacteria, viruses, all this kind of stuff out of water that you would not want in the water. On top of that, we're giving you hydrogen gas that your body is most likely not producing right now. So there's going to be huge difference in sleep. There's going to be huge difference in immune and energy, no longer getting tired in the afternoon. You're going to be able to produce the amount of ATP that your body needs based on the activity and demand you put on the body. And number 4, for those that are into energy medicine and those that are into quantum entanglement and all these things, we have the only water machine in the world that has quantum entanglement built into it for what we call the synergy resonance technology. And we have 330,000 frequencies in our database that you can choose to go into the water for eyes, for gallbladder, pancreas, for common parasite elimination, for corona support. I mean, a year and a half ago, we added an emergency protocol for all of our customers worldwide, which we call corona support. And we're able to bless their lives where they have some support and not doing that. And when we look at cytokine storms, hydrogen is amazing. When we look at China used hydrogen for treatments of corona. We have those studies now. They've been released. And when you talk about cytokine storms, hydrogen is amazing at cytokine storms. So depending on whatever you're looking for, we do have also Synergy Science University where you can get trained. And we have, 1,000 medical professionals that are educating their patients on our technologies and stuff. And so what I really want is people to tell each other, we're doing great as a company, but we're only scratching the surface. There's millions of people out there that need this. So please tell a friend, please tell a family member, and those that are medical professions listening to this, please implement this in your practice to bless the lives and complement the care that you're giving already.
I love it. Thank you so much, Paul. Everybody, you heard it here. If you got something out of today's talk, please share. Think of 2 loved ones that you can share the show with and ding them. Send it to them. Get out there. Give us those 5-star reviews on your favorite podcast platform. And we are What the Health. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel coming at you from the Contact Talk Radio Tuesdays from 2 to 3 Pacific time on Tuesdays. We will see you all next week. Thanks.